Good day, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this workshop hosted by T20 Indonesia in collaboration with the Institute for Economic and Social Research, LPEM-FEB Universitas Indonesia, and ERIA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. My name is Alin Halimatu Sa'dia, and I will moderate this workshop. I would like to extend our warm welcome to our distinguished speakers and participants, the lead co-chair of Task Force 3 of T20 Indonesia, Ibu Kuki Sujahmun, and Director General of Research and Policy Design Administration of ERIA, Mr. Toru Furuichi. Today's discussion will bring the topic of emerging economies toward net zero emission challenge and opportunities on technology innovation and financing. This is a very timely and important issue for sure, as we see many countries aim to increase their ambition towards climate target. We would like to bring issues of the development of technologies that are still at the early stage of development, such as battery storage, CCUS, hydrogen, ammonia, and direct air capture, and discuss the investment strategies to finance them. The insight taken from this workshop will be a good input for the work of Task Force 3 of T20 Indonesia to formulate recommendation for the G20 leaders, particularly Energy Transition Working Group. For all participants, we would like to encourage your engagement and participation by sharing your ideas and thoughts through the chat box. We will record your question, comments, and recommendation in the chat box and compile them as part of our discussion result. In doing so, please mention your name and your affiliation. Our program today will consist of 5 sections. First is the opening remarks and speech from our 2 keynote speakers. Second, the presentation from the speakers that will discuss the net zero from the perspective of technology. Third is the presentation from speakers that will raise financing issues. Fourth, we will have a dialogue on how to align and solve technology and financing issues. And the last one is the closing remarks. Now I would like to give the opportunity to Ibu Kuki, representing Task Force 3 of T20 Indonesia that works on the issues of governing climate targets, energy transition, and environmental protection. Bu Kuki now is acting as the Director of Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization, or IRID. Without further ado, let me hand over the screen to Ibu Kuki. Bu Kuki, you have about 5 to 7 minutes to give your remarks and also officially open this workshop. Bu Kuki, you may have the screen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ibu Alin, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm so glad that, and also thankful that everyone are joining us here. And thanks also for spare your time to attend this discussion. And I do hope that this session will support our collective effort to support the achievement of net zero emission, especially if you are talking about emerging economies that maybe have more challenges compared to, let's say, the industrialized one. And for today's session, as already mentioned earlier by Ibu Alin, this event is supported and co-organized by the LPEM UI and ERIA, and this is part of the side event under the Task Force 3 of Think Tank20. And already mentioned earlier, basically the result and also the notes from this discussion today, we will use it also as part of our input to the process and also input to the G20 as well as the T20 outcome also from this year process. And I would like to thank Ibu Niluh Puspadewi, who today will representing the DG for energy efficiency and new renewable energy and energy conservation from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Thank you so much, Ibu Niluh Puspadewi, that will give or deliver the keynote speech about Indonesian carbon neutral pathway. And then the second one, we will have Professor Jun Arima from ERIA, and also my fellow co-chairs also in this task force 3 that will share and give the keynote speech on global low carbon energy transition. And as already mentioned by Ibu Alin, we will have a number of sessions here during today's event. And I would more than happy to hear, input from not only from our distinguished speakers, but also from all the participants, so that we can develop and we can contribute to the process for the G20 especially, but beyond that for sure, to help us all to reach our net zero emission. And as we know, this net zero emission is basically a target for every country now, both under the climate process, international process under the Paris Agreement, but also as part of our development process in any countries. So I think I will just end my remarks here. And I would like to thank also Ibu Alin, Alin Halimatus Sadia, that will be moderating the session, and also she will play a significant role, of course, during the session today. So I think with this, I would like also to open today session and event and discussion, and I wish everyone has a great time in discussing this issue. Thank you very much, and back to you, Bu Alin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Kuki, for the opening remarks. Now I would like to welcome Bu Luh Nyoman Puspadewi, the Energy Conservation Director at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, to deliver her speech. Thank you for coming, Bu. Bu Dewi will share Indonesia's strategies on carbon neutral pathways. You have 10 to 15 minutes to give your speech. Bu Dewi, the room is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Alin. Excellencies, Ibu Mukti Handayani Sajusmun, lead co-chair of T20 Task Force 3, Professor Jun Arima from the Senior Policy Fellow of ERIA, and of course, Ibu Alin, and distinguished speakers, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure for me to present this today meeting on the virtual as a side event under Task Force 3 T20 2022 that have a topic about economic toward net zero emission challenges and opportunities of technology, innovation, and financing. As you can see in slide 1, the potential of new renewable energy in the predictable category is still being calculated. Currently, only 0.3% of the total potential has been utilized. Hydro potential is spread throughout Indonesia, especially in North Kalimantan, Aceh, West Sumatra, North Sumatra, and Papua. Solar potential is spread throughout Indonesia, whereas NTT, West Kalimantan, Riau having high radiation. Wind potential is mainly found in NTT, South Kalimantan, West Java. And despite having abundant new renewable energy potential for more than 600 gigawatt, the total utilization is quite low, consisting mostly from hydro energy, geothermal energy, and bioenergy in total capacity of 11.5 gigawatt. In addition to renewable energy, the existing potential of new energy is still not widely developed. This hard work to cooperation are needed to achieve 23% of renewable energy in the energy mix by 2025. Electricity consumption increased every year, but showing a little bit down during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. To increasing electricity consumption should be increase new renewable energy utilization. The government of Indonesia has set several strategies to accelerate new renewable energy, such as completion of the President Regulation, draft of new renewable acceleration, implementation of solar PV rooftop, mandatory bio-fire utilization, fiscal and non-fiscal incentive for renewable energy project, ease of doing business, stimulating demand toward electricity, namely electric vehicle, electric stove. Okay, next. Government issue the PLN 2021 and 2030 electricity supply business plan, is called RUPTL, which has a larger portion of renewable energy generation. This RUPTL is the greenest because it contains a portion, a new and renewable energy generation capacity of 51.6% or 20,928 megawatt in 2030. However, the 2021 until 2030 RUPTL still indicates dependence of fossil energy on the energy system in Indonesia. Total required investment is $55.2 billion and the emission reduction potential will amount of 89 million tons CO2. Private sector have an important role in supporting the new renewable energy development. Based on RUPTL 2021 to 2030, mostly 50% of new renewable energy power plant will be developed by the private sector. Next slide. Our ambitious target in renewable energy development comes along with some difficult challenges, as well as the great opportunities. Therefore, with the investment and cooperation with stakeholders, encouraging economic growth, solar PV rooftop, and through installing solar PV rooftop on buildings, houses, installing solar PV rooftop in industries with greenhouse gas emission reduction. You can see in the first that is 5.2 million tons CO2 investment required to $3 billion. On the next, for the large-scale solar PV, through offer on solar PV, both from PTPL and Persero, greenhouse gas emission reduction is 6.97 million tons CO2. Investment required $3.2 billion. As state to number 8, you can see that development of wind. You can see that with development of wind power plant by true offer from PTPL and Persero, greenhouse gas emission reduction is around 2.22 million tons CO2. Investment requiring $1.03 billion. This is there's opportunities for investment in renewable energy. For the next slide. This is our energy transition roadmap toward carbon neutral. This in timeline of strategic achievement to achieve net zero emission in the energy sector. In 2025 target, emission reduction is 198 million tons CO2 by implementation of 3.6 gigawatt solar rooftop, construction of new renewable energy plant capacity 10.6 gigawatt, gasification gas generator 1.7 gigawatt, take out of 80.8 gigawatt coal-fired power plant at RUPTL, convert to gas oil plant to renewable energy. Gas and steam power plant about 0.8 gigawatt, and as a replacement of steam power plant. In 2035, you can see in the slide that the emission reduction is 475 million tons CO2 by implementing no additional fossil power plant. no gas oil power plant, retirement coal power plant for the 6 gigawatt, and new renewable plant solar PV is 99 gigawatt, following by hydro, bioenergy, geothermal, hydrogen, and battery use is about 7 gigawatt. In 2050 target, emission reduction is 956 million tons CO2, where retirement coal plant is about 31 gigawatt, and following by the new renewable energy plant, solar PV, wind power, hydro, bioenergy, geothermal, and ocean current about 1.3 gigawatt, and nuclear 5 gigawatt. Hydrogen 9 gigawatt. This roadmap will be a joint commitment within the government and stakeholders to achieve net zero emission 2060. Okay, next slide. In 2060, all electricity will be generated by the renewable energy power plant, focused on variable renewable energy development. Renewable energy capacity with total 587 gigawatt comes mostly from solar, about 361 gigawatt, and followed by hydro, wind, nuclear power plant, about around 35 gigawatt, biomass, bioenergy, geothermal, and tidal, or ocean. Pump storage enters the system in 2025, battery energy storage system to be massively utilized in 2031. Hydrogen is utilized gradually starting in 2031 and massively in 2051. Nuclear power plant will enter the system in 2049 to maintain system reliability by 2060. It will need up to 35 gigawatt. Investment requirement from power generation about 142 billion US dollar, and transmission system about 135 billion US dollar, with total requirement about 1,177 billion US dollar, or 29 billion US dollar. Emission level in 2060 in the net zero emission scenario amount of the 401 million ton of CO2, while the Ministry of Environment and Forestry targeted the energy sector to have emission level of about 87 million ton of CO2 in 2060. The one of strategy to accelerate the net zero emission to passing out coal-fired power plant. In the coal-fired phasing out scheme, there is a financial impact for PLN or around about 38 billion US dollar. Based on the revaluation of PLN asset at the end of 2015, the age of coal-fired power plant PLN, which was operating at that time, was extended by 30 or 40 years, so that the natural retirement is in 2046 until 2066. It's needed regulation and legal rule, government regulation or presidential regulation, so that the implementation of the passing out can be done by business enterprise and could be sustainable. Next slide. Improving renewable energy capacity through various means is renewable energy development to some cluster, such as large-scale PV, hydropower, and geothermal. Bioenergy strategy through biofuel mandatory increase of firing implementation, and variable renewable energy the strategies through the biofuel mandatory increase and co-firing implementation. Energy conservation, the strategy through improved implementation of scheme, and electric vehicle implementation. Okay, next slide. The Ministry of Finance oversees several climate change financing or funding facilities from domestic to international funding sources, including the Green Climate Fund, BPDLH, SDG Indonesia, Indonesia One, Bappenas, Country Platform. More innovation and initiative are needed to accommodate necessary capital for renewable energy development as well as decarbonization. Next slide. The Indonesia renewable development will face of challenges in achieving to net zero emission. Of course, economic and technology, infrastructure, supply and demand to develop renewable energy and energy conservation for both power generation and non-electricity purpose should consider the balance of supply and demand growth. Funding, social dynamics, and an enabling factor to achieving net zero emissions such as policy support, infrastructure, funding support, and real R&D technology need good collaboration and participation from all stakeholders to accelerate energy transition and meeting climate goals. We are confident to reach our ambitions. Energy transition absolutely requires real action. Without adequate investment and solid commitment from our international partner, the level of achievement will not be successful as well have planned. I sincerely wish that through this forum, we can discuss the potential for forthcoming collaboration and step up our effort to achieve realistic energy transition and sustainable future. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you, Bu Dewi, for the presentation. I see question in Q&A box, and if you or anyone from MEMR could respond to that, it will be great. Thank you, Bu Dewi. Now I will move to our second keynote speech, Professor Jun Arima. Prof. Arima is the Senior Policy Fellow of ERIA and also the co-chair of Task Force 3 T20 Indonesia. Prof. Arima will present a topic on global low carbon energy transition. Prof. Arima, you have 10 to 15 minutes to give your speech. You may have the screen now.
Okay. And then, should I share the screen?
Yeah.
Or could you share the screen?
Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, I can.
Mas Dengga can help Prof. Arima. Okay.
Yep. Thank you. So I hope you can see the screen. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think you should make it like slideshow mode.
Yes. Okay. Wait a moment. How about this? Is it okay?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And again, good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure to present a global low carbon energy transition. And in fact, I think global energy transition is a very important policy objectives. But in reality, each country need to consider their own pathway towards a low carbon transition, leading to ultimate objective of carbon neutrality. So global picture is useful, but may not be relevant for each country's consideration. And if actually COP26 called for very ambitious goals for 1.5 degree stabilization since Industrial Revolution, and they called for a massive emission reduction towards 2030 and 2050, and also it includes the reference to the coal phase down and so on. And prior to COP26, the IEA presented Net Zero Emission 2050, assuming that the energy-related CO2 emission will be net zero emission in 2050. And they presented the backcasting approach, starting from net zero emission in 2050 and necessary energy transformation of the global energy structure. And that shows very, the strong, say, contrast with other scenarios like steps. That is something like reference scenarios, assuming the current NDC by each party, and announced policy scenario that includes revised NDC announced by several countries. But still, NZE, Net Zero Emission scenario, presents very ambitious emission reduction pathway and drastic change of energy structure. But interestingly, this global picture does not present the regional breakdown or country breakdown. So it may not be, say, relevant for each country because each country's energy situation is largely different. And the IEJ, Energy Institute of Energy Economics of Japan, is also presenting energy scenarios towards 2050. And unlike the IEA, they present a reference scenario and also advanced technology scenarios. Advanced technology scenario is, they're assuming energy and environment technologies are introduced to the maximum extent possible in order to secure stable energy supply and strengthen climate change countermeasures. So it is not as ambitious as NZT 2050, and its emission reduction is not a net zero emission in 2050, even under advanced technology scenarios. But that could present more, how can I say, a pragmatic energy solution to countries. So I think, perhaps I think you could consider both scenarios as, the reference for your consideration. And the ERIA is also conducting the carbon neutrality scenarios in collaboration with IEJ, given the fact that ASEAN countries, increasing number of ASEAN countries are putting forward their own carbon neutrality scenarios. But the timing ranges from 2050, 2060, and 2065, or second half of the century. So 2050 carbon neutrality for all the ASEAN countries does not seem to be practical or feasible. So therefore, we are now developing the collective carbon neutrality scenarios for ASEAN region as a whole, as well as individual ASEAN countries' carbon neutrality scenarios, taking into account their own carbon neutrality goals, using technology, the technology optimization scenarios. And we have set several scenarios that is baseline scenarios without any carbon constraint. That is a linear increase of the CO2 emissions towards 2050. That is not at all sustainable. But we have considered 2060 carbon neutrality for ASEAN region as a whole, and with two different scenarios, that is including carbon sinks and excluding carbon sinks. So without carbon sinks, then you need to have a complete net zero emission by 2060. But if you consider the impact of carbon sinks, then the stringency of the CO2 emission reduction could be a bit mild compared with the without carbon sink scenarios. And also 2030, we have set on two different scenarios. That is a more stringent emission reduction towards 2030, and or almost similar trends towards 2030, and with the carbon the reference scenarios. Now, this is a nutshell of our scenario analysis. And then we have set various assumptions regarding solar power, onshore wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass, nuclear, CCUS, hydrogen, ammonia, DACs and BECCS incorporated, and also the potential for individual renewables such as solar and wind were also taken into account given the climatic condition of the ASEAN region. And looking at the power generation in the ASEAN region, with that supplies, renewable energy becomes the main power source in net zero emission scenario, the carbon neutrality 2060 scenarios. for 56% in 2060, as you can see here. And hydrogen and ammonia, including co-firing, will be a part of the decarbonization of the power sector after 2040. So renewable is a very much important contributor, but together with that, hydrogen and ammonia will be absolutely necessary for decarbonization of the power sector, in particular after 2040. But in the short to midterm, efficient gas-fired power generation will also curb CO2 emissions from fossil fuel power generation. As you can see, in 2030 and 40, the role of natural gas is quite important. And in the longer term, of course, CCUS and co-firing with ammonia or hydrogen, and 100% ammonia and hydrogen will be played a vital role for decarbonization of the fossil fuel power sectors. But what caused some concern or serious concern is the current trend of the natural gas prices. Natural gas price is soaring because of the Ukraine war situation. And this is making it more difficult to switch from coal to natural gas, which has been regarded as a low-hanging fruit for low-carbon future, the decarbonization of the power sector in many ASEAN countries. So as a result, coal could stay longer than previously anticipated in the ASEAN energy mix. And this is, trend of the surplus capacity of the LNG. And because of the rush in European countries from Russian pipeline gas to LNG, at least for the short to mid-term perspective, then the competition among ASEAN countries and European countries over a limited amount of LNG could be intensified. That will lead to a higher LNG prices. And that will have a negative implication to the decarbonization in the region because coal to gas switching is quite important as a realistic option for lower CO2 emissions in the power sector. And coming back to our scenarios, the decarbonization is, of course, not a free lunch. That will entail the increase of the marginal abatement cost. And that cost would be higher for the scenarios without, say, resorting to carbon sinks. And if you take into account carbon sinks, then marginal abatement cost could be lower compared with without carbon sinks. But that will lead to about 3.6% and 5.2% of the ASEAN GDP in 2060. So this is not a free lunch. So you need to be ready for bearing that cost for decarbonization. And then given that fossil fuels stay longer than expected in ASEAN energy mix, the CCUS is particularly important. So that is why the ERIA has started a CCUS network together with the Japanese government. And then up to now, we have organized the Asia CCUS Network Forum last year, and we have co-hosted a series of events, workshops and capacity building course, research work have been conducted. And we are planning to have another network forum this year. So that is a summary of a presentation. That is, global scenario is useful exercise, but for each country may not be relevant because they have to consider their own unique decarbonization scenarios. And following the Glasgow Climate Pact, the increasing number of ASEAN countries are making various efforts for energy transition towards carbon neutrality. And pathways towards carbon neutrality could be diverse among countries. One size does not fit all. Each country's specific national circumstances must be taken into account. And availability and accessibility and affordability of energy supply is the most fundamental requirement for the ASEAN countries. And I think that will be the same for many developing countries. And in pursuing their respective carbon neutrality goals, the ASEAN countries need to explore a variety of options and utilize all fuels and all technologies. their decarbonization pathways also needs to be ensure other policy objectives, namely availability, accessibility, and affordability. And carbon neutrality is not the only policy objectives that needs to be a balance. So as presented by previous speaker, coal phase out entails economic cost. So therefore, they need to make a realistic and also sustainable coal phase out pathway. That is not, say, consistent with the international debate about we need to immediately phase out coal. But actually, that is not the case in many Asian countries, and we need to take into account that energy reality. And global energy crisis due to Russia-Ukraine war is making simultaneous achievement of energy security and affordability and decarbonization more challenging. And most notably, gas price hike could delay the fuel switching, and timely investment for alleviating energy supply crunch is essential. So, say, rejecting all kinds of fossil fuel investment for the sake of climate mitigation might, say, make energy security challenges more serious. So we need to, again, strike a balance between energy security and environmental sustainability. And ASEAN region could advocate the necessity of a stepwise and pragmatic solution towards carbon neutrality. And I think that could also be said for many developing country regions. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Arima, for your presentation. You mentioned an important point that to achieve net zero emission, the adoption of advanced technology is very important. You also mentioned the estimated marginal abatement cost, which is quite high, and we later should see in our next discussion whether it is possible to accommodate that in the carbon pricing policy scheme in the future. For participants, I encourage you to put your question in the Q&A box, and for comments, you can put it in the chat box. Thanks for all the keynote speakers for your insightful presentation. From Professor Arima's presentation, we can see from the helicopter view of the global status and challenge of pursuing low carbon energy transition, which also pointed the issues in ASEAN region. And from Bu Dewi's presentation, we can look at one country's example on how energy transition strategy in achieving carbon neutrality for the case of Indonesia. Now we will move to the more specific issues, which are the technological issues in the next session, and continued by discussing financing strategy. From the technological perspective, we have 4 panelists here. First is Mr. Akira Yasugi, PE Engineering Manager, INC and Electrical Engineering Team, Power Plant Engineering Group, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, that will discuss battery electric storage. Second is Mr. Jitendra Roy Hudori, King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, Kapsark, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, that will discuss specific technology of hydrogen ammonia. The third is Dr. Takashi Kamijo, the Chief Engineer, Licensed Technology Director, Decarbonization Business Department, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Engineering. Dr. Takashi will discuss carbon capture storage, specifically from the capture function aspect, followed by Dr. Zikyu Su, the CO2 Storage Research Group Leader, Chief Researcher at the Research Institute of Innovative Technology for the Earth, that will discuss CCS from the storage function aspect. The last one is Dr. Rohei Numaguchi, researcher at the Energy System Research Department, Corporate Technology Division, Kawasaki Heavy Industry, that will discuss direct air capture. I'm sorry to all panelists if I misspell your name, title, and designation. Due to limited time, I would like to give 5 minutes each to all panelists to share your ideas. I would like to ask your permission to remind you if your time is up. Without further ado, I would like to ask Mr. Akira to take the screen.
Yeah, I try to share my screen.
Please.
Okay. Oh, to Skype for that. Sorry, Sajada. Okay. Something wrong. Sorry. Oh, okay. Everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Sorry. Do you my screen? Do you see my screen?
Yes, but if you can make it in slideshow mode, it will be great.
Say more. What?
Slideshow. But if you cannot, yeah, it's okay, I think.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Sajada.
Share this way.
Thank you. My name is Akira Yasugi of MHI. I'd like to explain about our technologies for energy storage system. What we are, sorry. We are creating a feature that works for people on the planet by developing innovative power generation technology and solution to enable the decarbonization of the energy and delivery power everywhere. Based on that, I make a presentation of our technologies for the energy storage system, electrics and hydrogens. At first, I'd like to talk about an electric system. We will use the lithium battery system for that. In this field, our position is integrator, purchasing battery with container and cabinet or something, and the PCS transformer, including the MV distribution system. All of them will be controlled or monitored by EMS SCADA system, which is our own product. The main role of EMS SCADA is making a demand to the PCS, charge and discharge, but also EMS has another aspect that they have to communicate with the cloud system, which is our own cloud system, Tomoni. This is EMS SCADA system. On the left side, you can see cybersecurity we have, and also center our CPU. First response time is a high spec CPU, and then so I have protocol, communication protocol, model bus, and the PC that is very common on the substation area. And as I said, our EMS has a capability to communicate to the cloud system for remote monitoring to secure the proper operation. And the forecasting, our cloud system has a capability of the prediction of something like that. That information will be fed back to the EMS to be feasible of the optimized operation. This is the figure. Our Tomoni system has a capability of prediction demand and prediction of renewable generation. And also, as I said, this system has a capability to monitor the present and the historical data in the local side. With this information, Tomoni can figure out the optimized operation patterns of the BS, focusing on the degradation of battery. In case the ratio of degradation can be decreased, it means that the initial installed capacity of battery can be decreased. It means that capacity, capex also can be decreased. This is our target on this business. The next is hydrogens. These activities almost by them, our American team. They are the share leader in America for the energy storage of all duration in 2020. What is the all duration? Short duration can be covered by lithium battery, but all duration means that the long period of duration can be covered by hydrogens. This is a scheme. Our hydrogen system will receive electric power from the renewable energy. then this electric power will be used for producing hydrogens. It means that this hydrogen is purely green hydrogens, then can be storage under the ground. And then this energy can be used for the required places such as generation and industrial and transportation.
Sir Akira, I'm sorry, your time is up, but I can give you 1 more minute.
Thank you, thank you. So, okay, this is the application of our a hydrogen project. That is the actual project. So the next one is hydrogen. Not only America, USA, but also we have the plan in Japan to make a hydrogen park. That we installed in our Takasago machinery work in Japan. We have gas turbine here. So in this park, we have the plan to build the hydrogen produce equipment, and also the hydrogen which were generated from that equipment will be used for as a part of fuel of our turbine. And then our turbine use this hydrogen and generate electricity. And as per plan that at least this hydrogen plant will be started from the demonstration operation from 2023, maybe next year. That is a plan. So okay, thank you for listening, and terima kasih banyak.
Yeah. Terima kasih, Mr. Akira. Next is Mr. Jitendra. Please take the room.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you clearly.
Excellent. Thank you once again for inviting me to participate in this T20 virtual workshop. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be associated with the T20 Indonesia during the Indonesian presidency of the G20. Hydrogen and ammonia are critical enablers of the energy transition to the net zero emissions ambitions. Hydrogen represents a massive opportunity for global decarbonization efforts. However, several challenges need to be met and resolved. I'll classify them broadly as follows. The first one, financing the energy transition. The critical role of public investments and newer investment frameworks like the ESG. The transition to a net zero emissions economy creates new investment opportunities. However, we are lagging behind in multiple areas. The experience with the Sustainable Development Goals and the shortfalls in funding them illustrates the challenges associated. Net zero economy will require an even more massive scale of investments. And this is where investment frameworks like the ESG could help play an essential role in helping shape the investment vehicles and also increase investor attractiveness. Attracting private capital to help support the initial public funding will be critical to the overall success of net zero and decarbonization. The second one, cooperation and collaboration frameworks, the vital role of strategic partnerships. The energy transition and climate ambitions bring together an opportunity for developing strategic partnerships to examine climate, economic, geopolitical, finance, and trade issues. Net zero provides an opportunity to help shape markets and share best practices. Shared investments in supply chains and demand centers could help increase the pace of the transition while at the same time helping to reduce and mitigate the associated risks. The third one is infrastructure, repurposing the old and investing in new infrastructure. The energy transition will require massive, ongoing, and deep investments into multiple economic infrastructure sectors. The formation of hydrogen and CCUS hubs will be critical building blocks of these investments to help support the decarbonization of the power and industrial sectors. It will require a focus on regulation and policy making to support these investments and enable the creation of market structures. The fourth one, obviously, is regulation and policy. In this, certification requirements, access to technology, and sharing of frameworks is critical. These are critical aspects that could help define the future market developments. Whether the regulation is fair and inclusive, or is an imposition of non-technical and non-commercial barriers, will be crucial to help support the development of global trade in hydrogen and ammonia. The fifth one is building capacity and capabilities, human resources, research and development, and technology adaptation. Transitioning a workforce skilled in conventional energy skill sets while attracting and skilling a new workforce in the net zero emissions technologies would need to find complementarities and address requirements for additional training needs. CCUS and low carbon hydrogen and the ammonia can benefit from existing skill sets in hydrocarbons and chemicals. However, these would still need to be invested in new capacity building and in attracting talent. These are massively complex challenges which will have an immediate repercussions on the greater society, and managing this transition is going to be a considerable challenge. And the last and the most pertinent one, in my opinion, is the increasing divergence between the global north and the global south, and the role of multilateral institutions like the Think20, and how do we inculcate the learnings from the past. The mechanisms to help shape the dialogue between these two groupings will be an essential part of building consensus and increase the availability of funding to help support the energy transition. It is critical to recognize the wide range of approaches. And I will echo what Professor Arima had mentioned, that there is a huge divergence in approaches, and we should be cognizant of those. And in this divergence of approaches, there are multiple approaches which could benefit from circular economy frameworks, like the circular carbon economy framework that the kingdom had developed during its presidency of the G20 in 2020. And these can be used to address the need for enhanced international cooperation and collaboration to help facilitate access to technology, scientific and human capital, and understand that there is no single approach to net zero. Thank you. I'll finish now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jitendra, for your speech. Now we move to Dr. Takashi. You may have the screen now.
Okay, so can you see my screen coming?
Not yet.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so hi, good afternoon, and everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to make a presentation here. So my name is Takashi Kamijo, Chief Engineer and Licensed Technology Director for MHI, and in charge of shield capture technologies. So, excuse me. So due to the limited time, I want to cut the detailed presentation about companies. Mitsubishi Heavy Industry was established in the 1884, and the number of employees is over 80,000. And annual net sales in 2020 is 30 million US dollar, 30 billion US dollars. Our product cover a wide range from power to infrastructure, airplane, launch vehicle, transportation system, defense weapons. So our shield capture system is supported by MHI engineering. So this is a simple sketch and a simple diagram of our technology, KMCDR process. And KMCDR process is our proprietary shield capture technology from flue gas. And the KMCDR stands for Kansai Mitsubishi Carbon Dioxide Recovery Process. So our system consists of 3 big towers, quencher, absorber, or regenerators. And this system is very similar to the common acid gas removing system using amine solvent. So we use proprietary equipment in this technology, proprietary solvent, so-called KS1 or KS21. And together with proprietary equipment, amine washing systems and huge automatic load adjustment control systems and proprietary heat integration systems, so on. This system can allow to capture CO2 from flue gas up to 98 or even higher, 99%. Here you can see our extensive delivery record worldwide. And we have delivered 13 commercial capture plants so far. And this map shows the plant in Alabama also in almost commercial size demonstration plant in USA, Alabama. And now we have 2 projects under construction now in Bangladesh and others. So this map clearly shows we have proven technology and CO2 capture system can be utilized for anyone. So this is one of this is an overview of Petronura project, the world's largest carbon capture plant delivered in USA. And this plant start commercial operation from 2016. Unfortunately, due to the crude oil crisis due to the COVID-19, the unit is now shut down. But we expect this unit to restart up soon. And this capture plant capacity is 4,776 tons per day. And the capture CO2 from coal-fired flue gas. And this is actually the world's largest post-combustion carbon capture unit. And we proud that MHI technology enables such a significant milestone. So our technology now is used for many fields and drugs UK and also ZTCC for various clients. And now we are expanding application of our technology to LNG plant. Also, now we are considering to apply this technology to the cement plant. So in short, now we are considering to apply this technology for various facilities which exhaust CO2 emission.
Dr. Takeshi, your time is up, but you can.
Okay. So thank you very much for everyone. So time is up. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for Dr. Takashi for your presentation. Now we move to Dr. ZQ. You can take the room. Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is ZQ Shur from Wright. My pleasure to introduce CO2 storage technology. I started my CO2 storage career from year 2000. I can say in past decades, people talk about a lot about do we need CCS? But right now I can say people ask us how to deploy CCS. Basically, CO2 storage started with pilot test, then move to demonstration and finally go to the commercialization. Most CO2 storage projects now is operating in North America and Norway, and also the main operators are major oil and gas companies. Some projects in East Asian countries and Australia, Middle East, but less in South Asian countries right now. To achieve the gigaton CO2 storage, there are many components to achieve the goal. This slide shows the components here. For example, safety, environment, financial, policy, public acceptance, and regulation. So people call this like the symphony team need to work together. But today I focus on the safety issues here because I believe Indonesia and Japan are both located in the active zone. We need to take care about the potential risk issues. So this slide shows the storage site development, how to find a good sound for the CO2 store. And here shows some items, so some key points to find out the good reservoirs, and also need to find a good layer for the stop the CO2 migration. So the main issue for the storage site development is get the project or banking to provide the investment assurance, and also to adequate capacity with normal, with minimum cost calculation the development. Let me focus on two topics. The first one we call it safety or risk assessment management. I believe in Asian countries, sometimes people don't like the risk, in rather to use safety. And for the CO2 storage project operators, we face several potential risks. The potential risk means both of the risks are, most cases risks due to the uncertainty of the geology or technology itself. I just listed a few potential risks here. For example, loss of the injectivity, capacity, and the contaminant. And for Indonesia and Japan, operators need to take care about the induced seismicity, also the CO2 leak issues, because we may cause some environmental impacts. It shows the profile, shows the risk profile. So the peak here is come to the injection end. So it decreased in the post-injection period. To secure the CO2 storage safety, we have built a practical approach, which allowed us to directly mitigate the induced seismicity during the CO2 injection. We call advanced traffic light system, ATRS. We developed this approach based on the microseismic or natural earthquake motion data flow. By using this flow chart, we can always make decision the CO2 storage is safe. If it is safe, it's green light. If any issues, it will be the yellow. If any problems, we need to stop CO2 injection, which is the red. So all the data supports the judgment to show which light and even how to turn the yellow light back to the green light again. We have produced the approach, also applied this approach to the demonstration project in Japan, Tomokomai project. Another issue is cost-effective approach to detect the CO2 leakage or seepage in terms for the offshore CO2 storage. It's always often asked questions by the stakeholders, how to detect this CO2 once the CO2 leaked from the target reservoir, and then CO2 migrate slowly to the shallow part and finally reach the sea bottom. So I have developed an approach to locate the CO2 within the deep focused zone. For example, by around the high resolution 3D seismic survey can detect the CO2 from the target reservoir, can give the operators early warning, or maybe also can help the operator to finalize the remediation plan.
Dr. Zekiel, I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Okay, I just want to say that.
Yeah. Okay.
This is for the CO2 leakage. And I don't think people can make zero risks. So always need to manage risk. So what is the goal of the risk management? To reduce uncertainty or mitigate the risk to the manageable risk. This is the point for the banking issues. We're also publishing a guidance book to help the operators to learn the experience in the past project. Is published 3 guidance books by March this year, and the next 2 by March 2023, finally the other three by March 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. ZQ, for your presentation. Now we move to the last panelist for this topic, Dr. Ryohei. You may have the screen now.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, thank you for showing my slide. My name is Ryohei Numaguchi from Kawasaki Heavy Industries. Today, I will talk about my slide about the direct air capture. Next, please. The direct capture is a new concept of the CO2 capture. It captures CO2 from the atmosphere. And this means the direct air capture, DAC, can achieve the negative emission. And this technology can conduct everywhere. And this is a good point, different from the post-combustion capture. And this technology is now demonstrated in ongoingly by the several startup companies. The right picture shows the large deck demonstration planned by the other company, Climeworks, at Iceland. Next, please. And let me talk about our history of the CO2 capture technology development. We have been developed the solid type CO2 capture technology since the 1980s. That is first for the CO2 capture from the closed space, for example, the airplane or submarine or space station. And we converted this technology to the post-combustion capture. And currently, we also develop the direct air capture technology. Next, please. And first, we started the technical demonstration of the DAC from the 2019s, and for 3 years, under the support of the Ministry of the Environment, Japan. And the DAC system and the solid solvent, I mean the CO2 capture material, is developed, and also the life cycle assessment of our technology is conducted. Next, please. This is the typical results of our demonstration. By constructing this apparatus equipment for direct air capture, it consists of the several equipments like air injection duct and a solid solvent column. And also we use the steam to remove the CO2 from the solid solvent. And by using this apparatus, we conducted more than 1,000 hour operation, and we successfully captured 5 kilograms CO2 per day with more than 95% purity. So we demonstrate the stable direct air capture. Thank you. And we also evaluate the conducted life cycle assessment. This is a very important information to prove our direct capture technology. I mean, the vertical axis means the CO2 emission amount during the construction and operation of this DAC system. When we use the grid power for operation, we emit the 10 kilograms CO2 to capture the 1 kilogram CO2. So this cannot be the good technology to achieve the negative emission. But when we use the renewable energy, we can achieve the greenhouse emission less than the 1 kilogram per kilogram. So this means that negative emission can be achieved. And in current stage, the biggest greenhouse gas source in our DAC system is the dehumidification of the air. So we have to modify our technology to cut the energy to dehumidification by the development of the amine or this system. Okay, next, please. And the financial support from the Ministry of Environment is finished, but now we are conducting, continue to develop our DAC system. And our future target is the direct air capture plus carbon storage, DACs. Now, this is one of the key technology to realize the negative emission. And we have a strong advantage to achieve this by compare with the several advanced startups. I mean, we have the original solid solvent, and also we have a ability to the engineering, procurement, and construction (EPC) for the large scale plant. And for this workshop, we have to I think we have to comment the target cost of the DAC, but it is very difficult because the target cost is not determined now, because the value of negative emission is not socially well established. Everyone believes that this is very important, but it is very difficult to evaluate the cost, target cost.
Dr. Rohe, I'm sorry, but your time is up. If you have
okay, thank you.
To say, yeah.
Thank you. My final comment is we need the financial support for DAC, and it is for the demonstration, because we have to show that DAC is a good technology for negative emission. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Rohe. Thank you for all panelists for sharing your ideas on the specific issues of many technological options for decarbonization. Now we move to the next topic about energy financing. We have three panelists here. The first is Professor Frank Zotzo, professor at the Crawford School of Public Policy and director at the Center for Climate and Energy Policy, Australian National University. He will discuss climate financing issues in general. And the second one is Ms. Yukimi Shimura, director at the Planning and Development Department, Sustainable Business Division, MUFG Bank, that will bring perspective from the private sectors. And the last one is Ms. Kikuko Sinchi, senior researcher at the Climate Change Solution Group, Sustainability Division, Mitsubishi Research Institute, that will discuss specific issues on carbon credit. I greatly appreciate if the speaker can give 5 minutes of presentation each due to the limited time that we have. I will remind you if your time is up. Without further ado, I would like to ask Professor Frank Zotzo to take the screen.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy I can be with you, and thank you for the kind invitation by the organizers. I will share my screen just to illustrate a few points in my talk here about climate finance, and just bear with me for a second here. I was not aware that I would be indeed the first speaker in this session. So here we go, and I think you should be able to see these illustrations here now. So the good news is really, and this is illustrated in the latest IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, is that the world has an embarrassment of riches in terms of the opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, in particular in the energy sector, as well as in the industry sector, transport sector, housing sector, and of course in agriculture, land use change and forestry. And a very large amount of emission reductions come at very low cost. So the very detailed assessment of the state of knowledge by the IPCC identifies that global emissions could be cut by around about 1/4 between now and 2030 at costs of less than $20 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. So this is really quite low cost, in particular in comparison to the marginal cost of abatement of many of the policy options already in place. The question is, how can we in fact achieve a substantial share of these theoretically possible emissions reductions? For this, enormous amounts of capital investments need to be made. So the IEA, in its latest World Energy Outlook, estimates that the global clean energy investment that the world needs to make in order to get to net zero emissions needs to double or even quadruple. Right, so the annual clean energy investment needs to be 2 to 4 times as large as it currently is. Okay, and so that of course is a huge challenge because it takes away investment from other other areas of the economy. But at the same time, of course, it provides the opportunity to create the system of the future, long-lived energy and industrial infrastructure that will be clean and that will provide energy at very, very low running costs for a very long time to come, and thereby will result in economic productivity benefits for decades to come. So it's really a massive investment push that the world needs to go on in order to reap those benefits into the future. Now, we're not seeing that happen just yet. So there is a very large gap between the finance currently committed to the types of investments that reduce emissions and what is needed. So the IPCC estimates that at between 3 to 6 times the current flows for mitigation, and for the Southeast Asia region, this is estimated at a gap of between 5 to 12 times. So we need to massively scale up. How do we do that? Well, most of that money will come from private funders, but governments have important roles to play in paving the road and making it easier for private sector to commit that kind of money, which globally is in the many trillions of dollars per year. And so what we need is policy settings that support low emissions investments in all of these different sectors. Carbon pricing is a tried and proven way of doing that. Regulatory reform of market frameworks that make it more attractive for companies and investors to put their money into low carbon, zero carbon alternatives, public investments, and importantly, co-investments in infrastructure that support transition, for example, to renewable energy systems, for example, to electric transport systems and so forth. And most importantly, predictable, stable policy frameworks. So all of these things need not to be one-off and short-lived, but they need to be put in place sensibly and for the long run in order to create that confidence for investors to actually put their money onto the ground on that basis. And governments also importantly need to resist to subsidize declining industries, in particular coal industries, and instead put any relevant fiscal expenditure into regional economic and social adjustment in order to facilitate the politics and the social adjustment issues of that transition. So don't squander the money on propping up industries that will no longer deliver economic benefit in the long term. So I'll finish up on some suggestions that the G20 might find attractive as part of the T20 thinking process here. And I just want to highlight 3. So firstly, the possibility of G20 making a clear commitment to open trade and investment for clean energy. So we're in a period of increasing kind of inward-looking economic nationalism in terms of the overall global climate, but investments need to flow freely, in particular for clean energy and clean industrial systems. And we want to really, in the name also of economic efficiency, avoid unnecessary onshoring of energy. And of course, keeping that investment pipeline open internationally will be of tremendous benefit for emerging economies, including Indonesia. Secondly, the idea of an international green bank. So green banks have proven very useful to unlock private sector investments, in particular in applications to first of a kind type of investments, where banks or investment funds might shy away from the investment because they have no experience with it. And so, for example, Australia's Clean Energy Finance Corporation could be a model for an international green investment bank. And then finally, a very practical opportunity that the G20 would be to establish something like a forum for best practice action on energy transition. And so that could take the form of a dedicated facility for exchange of current experience on energy transition. What kind of policies and regulatory actions work? What doesn't work? How can you fine-tune the interventions that governments make in order to help facilitate those finance flows that are needed? This could become a standing forum for exchange between governments, probably facilitated by civil society, by think tanks, by universities, and it could help governments arrive at much more effective policy and regulatory settings that can help unlock the investments that are needed. And with that, look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Frank Zotso. Thanks also for pointing out recommendation for G20. Our next presenter is Ms. Yukimi Shimura. You can take the room, please.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Yukimi Shimura from a Sustainable Business Division of MUFG Bank. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me over to this very important event and panel discussion. Next slide, please. Before I would introduce a little bit about the financing transition technologies. For those of you who are not familiar with MUFG Bank is the biggest commercial bank in Japan and one of the largest banks in the world by asset size. And we operate in 50 countries. There's a strong presence in Asia. Next slide, please. Now, as a leading bank, MUFG is also committed to net zero in our own operation by 2030 and net zero in our finance portfolio by 2050. So it's very important that our clients achieve net zero by 2050. We are also members of global initiatives such as Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, as well as Net Zero Banking Alliance. You see a lot of net zeros on the screen. And MUFG has a significant presence in Asia and also being part of a creating enabling environment for financing institutions to finance transition activities in the region, including industry advisory panel, which indirectly contribute to the development of the ASEAN taxonomy, and the Asia Transition Finance Study Group, which I will explain in the next slide. Next slide, please. Now, Asia Transition Finance Study Group was launched in September last year under the Asia Energy Transition Initiatives of the Green Growth Partnership Ministerial Meeting. It aims to provide practical guidelines for financial institutions to finance transition activities while making recommendations to policymakers to create an enabling environment to finance transition activities, including use of new technologies. The group is going to release 2 reports in this September, and one with overall summary of first year activity, and another with practical guidelines to finance transition activities in the region. Next slide, please. Now, I understand that today we will talk about challenging in financing energy transition activities, especially with innovative technologies. Some of the panelists have already shared all these points, but I'd like to highlight a few main points that the financiers usually talk about when financing energy transition activities, especially with innovative technologies. First of all, lack of track record, especially with the first of its kind. And that actually requires extra efforts for the financiers to go through due diligence. And often we encounter problems for not understanding what are risks and who actually take those risks. And also, if it's the first of its kind, there is a huge possibility there's no viable business model. And that goes into the missing pieces of what could be the solid revenue cash flow and how we can actually be predictable in terms of revenue streams. And if there's no government policies to net zero, I mean, the key speech, we saw the government policies to net zero for Indonesia, but in many countries, we don't really see that. And that does actually give us a bit of concerns as well. And again, we don't have a confidence in new technology, so we do actually need additional informations and experiences. And the last but most, the least, de-risking instruments. What could be the possible solutions? I mean, there are many, many possible solutions, but the Asia Transition Finance Study Group highlighted that we do actually need public financing support, such as concessional finance, equity injection, ECA finance, or any additional guarantees provided by local governments, financial incentives, and broader risk sharing, including blended finance. And also, we do actually need new insurance products to cover innovative technologies. Next slide, please. Now, that being all these challenges that we have, many financial institutions try to find a solution to finance transition-related projects with new technologies, including MEFG. The deal you see in the slide took place last year. It is financing hydrogen fuel stations in California by a startup company called First Element Fuel. MEFG first provided $50 million loans to construct hydrogen fueling stations, and it was our first project financing the hydrogen fueling station. So it took us significant efforts to conduct due diligence, but we do actually manage to provide the loans at the end. And as we gained some confidence in the technology and operation, we wanted to gain further expertise in the hydrogen business, especially for the creation of hydrogen value chain, which lead us to invest in the company as well. So this is a very unique case, but it could happen with other projects using new technologies. Next slide, please. Now, to support the transition activities with new technology, especially, MEFG also initiates our discussion with our clients as early as R&D stage, or to understand the technologies of our clients are trying to develop, or at feasibility study phase, to examine different options for business structure for commercialization.
I'm sorry, but your time is up. You can.
Yes, just another 30 seconds. This is particularly an important step for us, as decarbonization with new technology requires banks to plunge into unconventional business areas, and we need to make the unknown known in order for banks to decide to what extent we can take risks as a commercial bank and consider ways for de-risking. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Yukimi, for your presentation. Now we move to the last presenter for this session, Ms. Kikuko Sinchi. The room is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me take a few moments to share my screen. I hope you can see my slides in presentation mode.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important event. I'm happy to take part in T20 for the first time, and I would like to share some information with you on the development of carbon market in relation to CCS. This is a very broad overview of the history of CCS in carbon crediting schemes. It started in mid-2000s within the CDM framework, which is part of the Kyoto mechanism. In 2005, the first CCS methodologies were proposed. It took 5 years for COP to decide to include CCS in CDM. And in 2011, the COP adopted modalities and procedures, which is basically a set of rules that allow CCS projects to claim carbon credits in the CDM. However, just after that, with the collapse of the carbon market and due to some very strict rules that were set by COP on CCS projects, the CDM projects never materialized under the CDM framework. And what happened after that is quite interesting. Countries and regions developed their own carbon crediting schemes, and in some areas like the USA and Canada, they adopted CCS as one of the sectors to for carbon credits, and it happened first in US and Canada, and then it just last year Australia approved its CCS method under their own emissions reduction fund, which is the carbon credit scheme of Australia. And now we're finally seeing some developments in CCS carbon credits through CCS in the voluntary carbon market. And as you know, you may wonder what's happening with Paris Agreement for CCS. And unfortunately, there was no specific reference to CCS in Paris Rulebook, which is the set of rules adopted for carrying out Article 6 market mechanisms. However, as you may be aware, the Glasgow Climate Pact made a clear decision on the phase down of unabated coal in all countries, which may give rise to demand for CCS in sectors that are reliant on coal, such as it may be some power sector or some heavy industry sector. And the rules for under the Article 6 are still under development. There still needs to be a governing structure development and so on. So we still need to wait and watch for adoption of various rules and transfer of methodologies, including standards and guidelines from CDM. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there were some standards and rules adopted under CDM, and we want to wait and see if any of it or gets transferred to Article 6 or how they get transferred to Article 6. And there's one notable development going on for Article 6.2, which is the cooperative, called the cooperative approach. And some of you may have heard that there's an initiative by the Japanese government and 17 partner countries called Joint Crediting Mechanism. This is already being carried out and under operation as a pilot Article 6.2 program. And now the JCM is considering to include CCS in its sectoral scope. And I understand there are some project developments going on. So we would like to look forward to how this activity gets developed. And also a very interesting activity going on is in the voluntary carbon market. And just, I think last week it was announced that this guidance developed out of the CCS Plus initiative is now being proposed by Vera, which is the operator of the largest voluntary carbon market called the VCS, Verified Carbon Standard. Now they're accepting public comments on their guidance on the geological carbon storage, which is basically CCS. So, and this is a private sector-led initiative. As you can see, a lot of different actors are involved, and I really look forward to seeing further developments in this area. And for some, yes.
Your time is up,
okay, this is my last.
Like 1 more minute. Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is my last section. There are some issues to consider, such as types of eligible CCS activities, including the eligibility of CO2 EOR, for example. As you know, a lot of countries and regions with advanced CCS projects are moving away from CO2 EOR, but this might actually be the technology demanded or needed in emerging economies. And the problem of permanence, how to manage risks. It was mentioned by one of the previous speakers, how to manage risks of CO2 leakage and how to address such risks. You cannot monitor, forever. And avoidance of double crediting. For example, if you count CO2 storage for blue hydrogen, can you also claim carbon credits for the same CO2 stored? Is that considered double crediting or double claiming? These things need to be considered, but I look forward to seeing further developments in carbon markets with regards to CCS. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kikuko, for your presentation. Thank you to all panelists for sharing your ideas on the financing issues of energy transition. Now we move to the next agenda. In this section, we want to facilitate a dialogue between energy, technology, and financing expert group. So we can divide all panelists into these 2 groups. And we discuss how we can align both issues and overcome the barriers. So far, we have identified several technology developments that are innovative, such as electric battery, hydrogen ammonia, CCUS, direct air capture, that will surely contribute to decarbonization, specifically net zero emission in the future. We discussed also that developing such technology need a lot of investment. Thus technology development and financing should be at one set. In this section, I will raise several questions for the technology expert and the finance expert separately, and move further to the question for both groups. Our keynote speakers are also welcome to join if you want to respond to this question. First is from the technology aspect. So my question is, what are the key points to reduce the cost of technologies? Because I think we should aim to achieve like grid parity or economic feasibility for this advanced technology. You might highlight issues concerning market size or from the demand side, innovation of technologies, and sufficient investment or investment needed, including for R&D activities. Maybe who wants to go first to give response?
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah, please.
So if we look at the background of how renewables capacity was built up, it was primarily because of the investments made by Chinese industry in solar and in wind, which allowed for that scaling up to happen. In the case of net zero technologies, there will be a need to have a much more of a sharing mechanism where technology and investments are shared, and this will require a much more of a cooperation and a collaboration framework rather than a competition framework. This is going to be very difficult to achieve, especially in today's economic climate, where you see resource nationalization, fears of a recession, and increasing economic competition for a shrinking market. So these become very difficult to balance in an ongoing economic era where growth is slowing or stagnant. There is increasing shrinkage of economies as a result of the events in Europe. So how do we manage that? It's going to be a very critical one. And as a result of one of the repercussions of the war in Europe is that countries are going to start focusing on ensuring that they manage not only their energy security, but also their supply chains. So they would want to have more and more control over supply chains in terms of raw material, in terms of technology, in terms of capital. This is going to be contrary to what is being ambitioned under the net zero. So we have two different approaches which are being coming out. One is something which is being imagined, and one thing which is what we are seeing in reality. So how do we balance that is going to be something that needs to be discussed and commented upon and thought upon, and we need to find a way out. Otherwise, we could easily slip into a situation where we become more carbon intensive than we were historically. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Jitendra, you mentioned about the challenge in the market situation. Yeah, maybe the next step is to think about how to some kind of regulate the market or build like enabling environment to promote innovation until the advanced technology is commercially viable. Yeah? I would like to invite the other panelists to respond to this question. Yeah, so the idea is how to make this advanced technology cheaper. What should we do? Maybe.
Okay.
Dr. Rohe. Okay. Oh, okay. Dr. ZQ first, and then next Dr. Rohe. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
This is ZQ. May I comment on the storage part? In terms of cost, I think the cost for storage compared to the CO2 capture is small, is low. So I think recently people realized that the transportation, CO2 transportation also shared a big part. So to make the CCS project cheaper, you need to find the site where, if the storage site is close to the emission source, that means you can cut the cost for transportation. And if the site is very suitable for the storage, for example, the high permeability, high porosity, you also have a chance to cut the cost for the storage part. So to make everything cheap, is find a good matching between this storage site and the CO2 emission source in terms to get the project commercialized. Thank you.
Yeah. You mentioned an important point about this logistic strategy. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Next, the last one maybe for this question, Dr. Rohe, you still want to? Okay. After Dr. Rohe, maybe Prof. Arima. Yeah.
Yeah. You say that how to down the cost for the DAC technology, but this is just a technical problem. So development of system or material to CO2 capture. So by solving these kind of the technical problem, we can decrease the cost for CO2 capture. But this is a not serious problem. But the problem for the achieving realizing the DAC, it is important to demonstrate the DAC technology at the how to say realistic site. So how after the capture CO2, how to store the CO2 or how to utilize the CO2, that it is a very big problem. So to show that DAC is a good technology to achieve the negative emission, that we need some support, especially financial support, to conduct the demonstration outside of the company. This is my comment. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rohe. I don't see any reason from Prof. Arima. Maybe you can respond to the next session. Yeah. The next question. So the second question is about the financing issues. Maybe from the finance expert group, maybe you could elaborate more on the barriers that hesitate investment in decarbonization technologies. Maybe it could relate to technology uncertainty, demand uncertainty, or lacking of government policies and guidelines, or lacking of de-risking instrument. Maybe in particular, we could also point out what kind of business model that suit to finance new technology, like blended finance, how to blend the financial instrument option. Yeah. Okay. Maybe anyone who wants to respond to this? Okay, Frank, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Pauline. I'll be happy to get us started with this. It's a mix of uncertainties that need to be addressed, just like you pointed us to already just now. And there are obvious technological uncertainties that remain, but these are largely resolved for the bread and butter technologies like wind and solar, increasingly resolved for energy storage as well, where the very large investments need to come from. There are very important uncertainties regarding policy, of course, and we've seen this really in most countries. There's an expectation by investors, by companies, by markets, that there will be policy settings that will provide financial benefits to zero carbon technologies relative to high carbon technologies, but these policy settings still emerge, and it's very difficult for investors to form firm expectations as to what those policy settings and their effects on investment viability will be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And so it's very important for governments to create that kind of predictability. and put in place, for example, when a carbon pricing mechanism is put in place, to do it in a way that creates confidence that this will still be there a decade or two down the track, and to provide a mechanism to anticipate what the price incentive might be. You also mentioned co-investment options, really important, and there are tremendous opportunities for the public, for public co-investments, especially in new technologies, in first-of-a-kind technologies, in the kind of investments where it needs to be shown that they are viable as commercial investments. And this is, in fact, the model of a green bank such as Australia's Clean Energy Finance Corporation. It's this government rolling fund that independently invests as a co-investor in first-of-a-kind type projects in energy efficiency, in renewable energy, in new systems, in clean industrial applications, and so forth. And that does a lot of the legwork in trying to better understand the options and the future returns, and that as a result has great success in bringing along private finance. And oftentimes the second, third, fourth time that such an investment opportunity comes up, it will be the private sector that jumps in and does the work. So there are tremendous opportunities, and many governments are working in that direction. All of these efforts need to be strengthened and sped up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yeah, it is very important, yeah, to frame or shaping the expectation of the private sector, because this is like long-term investment, yeah, particularly for new technologies that is still uncertain in many aspects. Okay, maybe I would like to invite other panelists. Ms. Yukimi, yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just echo what Dr. Jotso mentioned, and I think already you mentioned you cover many barriers that we see the financial institutions actually see. And the key word is a predictability. Is really, first of all, cost is cost. When it comes down to it, we will just assume whether it is the 10 billions or 100 billions, cost is cost. Whether there are enough cash inflow to balance those costs, that's a main thing. And the predictability is important to understand what could be the minimum cash flow we can expect, especially in the market where there's a high fluctuations for the revenue stream. And in many cases, the new technologies that's been presented today, we don't know what could be the revenue stream. For instance, for the CCS, who will pay for the cost for the CCS? If there are any carbon pricing mechanism, who actually use those carbon pricing mechanism to pay for those new technologies so that we can implement those technologies, and whether they are committed to pay for a certain period of time so that we can have a predictable income for the long-term period. So that's the first thing. And blended finance is actually, it's blooming right now. And it's actually a very interesting option. So maybe we can actually foresee the opportunities for that. MEFG, in fact, is the accredited entities of the Green Climate Fund, where we see a lot of blended finance opportunities. And that it's not just about mixing the public equity investment with the private equity investment, but also mixed with the grants or the guarantees or any other de-risking instruments. So those are we can actually assume different combinations of this. So that could be a new opportunities that we can pursue. But also MEFG invest in the private-led blended finance, because usually blended finance is led by the public authorities or the public institutions, for instance, the green banks. But now there's a private sectors that's been organizing the blended finance and do the manage the funds as well. So that could be a new area that we can pursue as well. So those are just minor, more additional points to what Dr. Josso mentioned.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Yukimi. Yeah, so all factors construct the revenue stream and the cost stream become important, and we should think the policy that can reduce the risk and increase certainty. I think including the risking instrument, it can be important, and we can see maybe in developing countries this kind of instrument is lacking. So this is our agenda also. If I may, I will like to move to the last question for both groups. Since we are developing recommendation for G20, maybe we can address what kind of roles of government and your expectation to the government in order to promote this advanced technology adoption as well as the financing. Maybe you could mention something also about regional or international cooperation, how to improve this technology adoption, and also improvement in the existing framework, because I believe that there are frameworks that exist yet but still need improvement. Okay. Who wants to give response to this? Maybe Prof. Jun Arima or okay, Frank.
Look,
Jun, I would like to give the opportunity to Frank first, and then Prof. Jun. Yeah. Okay.
I'm very happy the other way around as well, Professor Arima.
Frank, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I will attempt to be brief in that case. Look, I mentioned it before, and it's very obvious. We are at a time where many countries are very inward looking, where constituents, I think rightly so, have grave concerns about economic growth, and international collaboration tends to suffer as a result at times like this. And it is really important to keep on a really solid footing for international cooperation on energy, on anything to do with the energy transition and climate change action, and in particular with regard to investment flows. So the efficient outcome will be to deploy a disproportionately large share of the global clean investment, especially clean energy investment, in industrializing and developing countries. And at the same time, logically, a large share of the overall investment made will originate from the higher income countries, where the population structure is geared more towards retirement age and where those excess funds are more available. And so we will want and need to see international capital flows, very large ones, for clean energy sector investments. And so I think for the G20, there's an important role to actually acknowledge this fact, and to perhaps come to some sort of agreement to foster international capital flows for low carbon investments. I think this is a very important role that G20 could play at this particular fork in the road.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Frank. Prof. Arima? Please.
Yes, thank you very much. And also, we need to acknowledge the diversity of the pathways towards carbon neutrality across developed and developing countries. And it could be also different even across developing countries, say, taking into account the energy endowment and also development stage and so on. And G20 is a unique forum encompassing both developed and developing countries. So unlike G7, we need to make it absolutely clear that there is not a single pathway. The pathway could be diverse, and also the means of implementation, including finance, should be also, I think, more inclusive rather than exclusive. I mean, if we limit ourselves to the support only to zero carbon technologies, including renewable and energy efficiency, that may not be fitting with the energy reality of the developing countries, which may still need to count on fossil fuels. And even though you do not like it, but that is a reality. So we need to acknowledge that reality. So first, low carbon future and ultimately zero carbon future. That kind of phased approach would be very much important. And that message should come from G20, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Arima. Yeah, I think the insight that we can get from the discussion, we have to acknowledge the diversity among countries and region, and to promote some kind of convergence and also consolidate all the effort, and then also optimize and maybe upscale the existing framework. Okay, I think we are at the end of our workshop. Thank you all for your presentation and sharing your ideas.
Moderator, is the Shimura-san need to raise a hand.
Oh,
Shimura-san
okay.
need to raise a hand.
Oh, okay. I think we can.
Just 2 minutes or even one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
As much as I mentioned about a lot of the financial barriers, I mean, the barriers the financial institution face, what the financial institution dearly seek and recommend is really creating the government developed pathways to net zero. And it's the individual ones, as Dr. Arima said. In the Asian Transition Finance Study Group, we talked about not just the emission reduction, sustainability, but we also a balance between sustainability, reliability in terms of energy security, affordability for the energy costs. But on top of that, we need to have a social stability. So we talk about the just and orderly transition. We do, I mean, every countries have a different paces to move towards net zero. And we do actually need to take that into considerations. And for financial institutions to provide finance, we need the guidance from the governments, which pathway, how fast they're going to move towards net zero, and what they're going to do in terms of all these energy transitions, which technologies are going to push or support. And we do really need those guidance from the G20 governments as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Yukimi. I think you mentioned an important point. Yeah, the direction is needed, and also incorporate just transition framework also important. Okay, so I would like to give the floor to Mr. Toru Furuichi, the Director General for Research and Policy Design Administration ERIA, to close this event.
Thank you very much.
Toru, the screen is yours.
Yes. All distinguished speakers, moderator, panelists, and participants. Greetings to you all. Good afternoon from Jakarta. I am Toru Furuichi, Director General for Research and Policy Design Administration of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, that is ERIA. I am very pleased to make some closing remarks of this T20 webinar that has addressed the principal issues and possible actions to take in the view of emerging economies toward net zero emission, challenges and opportunities on technology, innovation, and financing. To the chair of T20 Task Force 3, governing climate target, energy transition, and environmental protection, Ms. Mokti Handayani Jamun, I would like to convey ERIA's president greetings and thankfulness for having given to ERIA the opportunity for taking the role as a co-organizer of this very important T20 webinar. As Professor Arima Sensei said, after COP26 held in Glasgow last autumn 2021, the world starts its movement towards attaining a carbon neutral society. These targets are to be reached by around the mid of this century. However, carbon neutrality can never be reached in a very short term. We must reduce greenhouse gas emissions year by year. And finally, we would achieve net zero emissions shortly after 2050 or 2060. Nevertheless, financing is a big challenge for a lot of countries to shift to the cleaner, low carbon fuels and technologies. And this is especially true for the emerging economies. And the public sector can partly finance, but this option is limited by national construction constraints and sovereign debt ceiling. Therefore, the scale of this investment will inevitably have to rely on mobilizing private capital largely. And countries need financing instruments for reducing risks to attract greater public sector participants in financing clean energy top projects. Furthermore, marketing transformation shall require a combination of these instruments, and at least in the initial years, it will need direct financial and grant incentives. This afternoon, we have listened to a very fruitful discussion between the respectable speakers, panelists, and the moderator from both technology and financing perspectives. And we have taken a lot of interesting lessons and fruits for thought on how to adequately finance the growth of clean fuel sources and technologies. Throughout today's speeches, presentations, and the discussion, we have explored possible workable financing mechanisms in the different technology clusters that play important roles in the energy transition in ASEAN countries. We need to continue to map the different public, private, and international financing mechanisms in each of the technology clusters, not only the renewable energy resources like wind or solar, but also the new energy resources and carriers, especially hydrogen and ammonia, the promising technology of CCUS, including DAX, direct air capture with carbon capture and storage by, as Dr. Numaguchi said. We need to continue to formulate the countermeasures of the financing bottleneck of each technological cluster and to elaborate the workable financing mechanisms. After this, we need to disseminate and disclose the findings of results that we obtained from the activities of mapping, formulating of countermeasures, and elaborating the workable financing mechanisms to the large public through our research works, dialogues, and publications. All distinguished speakers, moderator, panelists, and participants, I really hope that ERIA with its networks and stakeholders will be able to make continuous contribution in elaborating and formulating the action plan to be taken in the T20 and G20 Indonesia's presidencies, especially in the energy transition. Lastly, again, I appreciate your kind participation and valuable inputs in this discussion. I hope you have a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Toru, for the closing speech. Thank you to all the keynote speakers and panelists for sharing your thoughts, and all the participants who engage actively in the chat and the Q&A box. This will end our workshop session. I hope it can give you insight on how we can accelerate the adoption of advanced technology for decarbonization in the energy sector, particularly in emerging economies. I'm sure our discussion will benefit Task Force 3 of T20 Indonesia in developing concrete and doable recommendations for G20 leaders. I hope you enjoy our workshop. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.